which is at the Central Service Office here in Boston. It meets on Friday nights. If you're ever in town, come see us. We'd love to have you. My sobriety date is July 9th of 1990, and I currently serve as the immediate past delegate for Eastern Massachusetts. But I so appreciate the invitation to speak on this meeting tonight. Especially, it means a lot to me to be speaking on a holiday. I've said this to Julian a number of times, like the meetings that were held on holidays saved my ass when I was first getting sober. And it's so important to me that the meetings continue to go on every single day, and that we're here and available for anybody who, you know, needs to get our message. I feel like overall my story is pretty simple. I grew up in an alcoholic family. I'm the only member of the family that's actually in recovery. And it was a really crazy place to grow up in. Along with the addiction, there was also a lot of mental illness. And we have 4 kids in the family, and my oldest brother is my parents' biological son, and the youngest 3 of us are all adopted. So early on, I didn't look like anybody, and my brother and my sister are very, very gifted athletes, and I had glasses, braces, orthopedic shoes, and played the cello, and was completely, totally did not fit in any way, shape, or form. And so early on, that feeling of just not belonging was really prevalent. And on top of that, there was just a lot of things that had happened. There had been a child that my parents had adopted who had passed away, and I didn't find out about that until I was a teenager. And it was just, there was this death hanging over the family that nobody talked about, and this just air of unbelievable grief. And it was just, all I knew was that my mom was sad, and that, you know, it was just strange and a little thick in the house all the time. But emotions were not things that we ever learned how to talk about. It was just not the way things happened. And early on, my brothers started drinking. My dad was an active alcoholic, and my brothers did the normal drinking in high school thing. And when I started to do that, it was made very clear to me by my dad that that was not okay. Like, a girl drinking was just not okay in our house. And the first time I got caught, it was really, really bad. My dad was a violent alcoholic, and it's one of the scariest nights that I have in my memory. So the way that I coped was become the perfect daughter, and I held off from drinking. And I heard a woman in a meeting many years later say that she was battling the alcohol long before she really picked it up, and that was so much my story. I just stayed away from it, and, you know, got great grades in school, did all things, helped my mom take care of my brothers, was at the top of my class, was in all the activities. And when I graduated from high school and went to college, I feel like suddenly I wasn't being watched anymore. It was a whole different, you know, scenario. And from the moment I got to school, I started drinking. And within 30 days, I was drinking every single day. And my alcoholism just took off. It was, you know, just about everything that I've heard people share about in meetings started to happen to me. And I started making all of my choices based around alcohol. And I started making all my friendships based around alcohol. My class schedule was completely based on alcohol. You know, I remember my class schedule from like my first semester when I was at school, and I, you know, started off with 8 a.m. classes 5 days a week. And by the time I got to senior year, I had only 3 days of classes, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and my first class never started until 1:30 in the afternoon, and I wasn't even making those. You know, I had this feeling that as long as I had on my eyeliner and when I left my room, nobody would tell that there's any problem with me, because it's all the outside stuff that mattered, nothing about, you know, what was actually going on. And the truth is, like, all my friends changed. Like, by the end of my freshman year, people were already confronting me about my drinking. And so my reaction to that was to move across campus to a different dorm and make a whole new set of friends. And that continued to go on for the years that I was at school. I was really fortunate. Moving into my senior year, I ended up joining a theater troupe on campus. And one of the friends that I made at that in the theater troupe let me know that she didn't drink. And eventually I found out that she was a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And so we were doing a show. The first show was in the first semester of my senior year. I went to an all-women's college, and so we played all the men's roles. I was in a Shakespeare troupe, and so it's sort of the reverse of Shakespeare's time. And I was dressed up as a guy with like facial hair, with a beard and a mustache and everything, which really impacted my drinking during the show, because like I just didn't know how to negotiate like not getting like my beard wet. So what was happening was I would go up to the theater part of where we were, do a scene, go back down to the kitchen that we had in the theater, drink as much, like count as many beers that I can, but always through a straw, and then try and go back up and do more shows and like to do another scene. And what happened was my friend Trisha, who was the one who was sober, like kept walking in while I was drinking, and immediately I'd start hiding my booze. So my beer would go like into the microwave, behind the toaster, on top of the fridge, anywhere where she couldn't see that I was actually drinking. And I don't really have memories of this. I know this because years later, she looked at me and said, like, I was watching you the whole time. And, you know, she was also seeing, like, I was slowly but surely becoming completely and totally unglued. And, you know, as things would go on, I lost the ability to just really deal with life. And so I was not getting out of bed until 6 o'clock in the evening, and I'd go across campus to the theater where I'd stashed all my booze. And I would crawl down into the basement where we had the costumes and sit in the basement and drink all by myself. And, you know, it's funny because at the time, you know, when I first got sober, we still had a lot of housewives who talk about how, you know, that they hid things around the house. And I was going, I never did that. I never did that. And then I had to stop and go, no, I hid them in the theater. And they actually, after I got sober, my theater troupe threw a party with all of my leftovers. They were like so excited, like, here's my stash that I left behind because I'm not drinking anymore. But, you know, as things went on and like the insight stuff started to tally up, like I just didn't know like how people like managed to run their lives. Like I saw people all the time, like doing the normal life stuff. And I had no idea how to do that. Like, I really felt like everybody got this rule book, and I didn't understand, like, how they could keep their lives on track. And my senior year, everybody's, like, putting their resume together and, like, applying to grad school, and I'm, like, fearing that my life is going to fall off a sharp cliff at the end of May and drinking over it. Like, that was all I knew how to do. And so, like, you know, I would get into these crying jags, and I'd start crying, and like I'd be crying for like 3 or 4 hours and just couldn't stop. And I remember one of my friends looking at me going like, she's like, I think you're a really good actress. And I was like, oh, that's great. She's like, no. She's like, I think you're a really good actress because I think none of us know what's going on with you. And that's really scary. And that never hit me until later. But like, I felt like I had a huge black hole inside, and I didn't realize that, you know, that wasn't how it was supposed to be. I just thought, you know, you hear that thing, life sucks and then you die. That's got to be what this is. This is just it, kids. Suck it up. What happened, though, was my friend Trisha, realizing that spring break was coming senior year and I probably had no money. So she made this offer to me, and I ended up getting in the car and driving to Maine with her. And, you know, at this point, I know that Trisha's sober and we're going to stay at her boyfriend's house and he's sober. I'm like, okay, this might not have been the best idea I had, but like I had no other plans. And, you know, she lured me in with this, it'll be great. You can sit on the ocean, stare at the water, and no one will bother you. And that sounded like heaven for me at that point in time. And we got there, and I remember we went out to dinner that night. And all of a sudden it occurred to me, like, they don't drink, and it might be rude to order something to drink, because I was complete people pleaser at the time. And I'm like, oh no, I can't do that. And so I didn't order anything to drink. And years later, I read one of the lines that Bill Wilson had about the feeling of ground glass underneath your skin. And I finally understood the feeling that I'd had that night, trying not to drink and trying to be normal with these people. And like, it just felt exhausting. And I didn't know what I was doing. And I hated it. I was just like, it was the longest dinner to get through. But during it, what Trisha said to me is she had this thing she had to do the next day. And so she was very active, and she was asked to speak at a high school, and she was going in the next day, and did I want to come along and support her? And I'm, good people-pleasing, supportive friend at this point. So I got in the car and went with her. And what she didn't tell me was that it was a public information commitment for Alcoholics Anonymous. So I, the next morning, ended up in a cafeteria where I sat at the back, and Trisha went down front and got in front of a room full of sophomores in high school and proceeded to tell them all what it was like, what happened, and what it was like now. And as she was talking, it occurred to me that she was telling my story. And everything that came out of her mouth, like all of the feelings I had and the way that my life was slowly just going downhill, and the academics I had cared so much about, like I was crawling across campus at like 6 o'clock every night, begging professors to like take the papers that were due like days ago, and just completely and totally fucking up my life because I did not know how to stop drinking, and I didn't know how to keep my life on track anymore. And the more that Trisha talked, the more I realized, like, this is my story too. I think that the grace of God entered my life early on, when instead of like getting angry at her, when we got to the car, I asked her if she went to meetings, and she said, yeah. And I'm like, can I go sometime? And of course she came out with, of course, there's one tonight. And my first meeting was the Orr's Island meeting. It was a big group meeting. It was a Down Island meeting on Orr's Island. And, they went out in the room, and by the time they got to me, it just fell out of my mouth. I'm Sue, and I'm an alcoholic. And they were so lovely. Like, they changed the meeting, and it became a meeting about the first step, and everybody shared their stories with me, and it was really awesome. And one guy gave me his big book, and, and I was really listening to them, and I'm like, I wasn't really sure what I had just done. But there was one guy that came up to me at the end of the meeting and just started with the, well, little girl, I don't think you're ready to be here yet. And, of course, that's what I wanted to listen to. I didn't like hold on to everybody who had said exact things that I identified with. I hung on to that guy. And I'd say that for the first 90 days, I probably stayed sober on spite because I was going to show him. But that doesn't really last long. And everybody in the world gave me suggestions, and they told me not to, go to meetings, get a sponsor, go to the same meetings, and every suggestion they gave me, I ignored. And pretty soon, maybe I'll go to one meeting a week, or maybe it won't really matter. And long story short, I graduated and I moved home to where I didn't know anybody. And at about 100 days in, I went to my dad's liquor cabinet and started drinking his scotch. And it was the first time I actually watered it down. I'd read about that somewhere. Like, I'd never done that before. But almost immediately from the moment I drank that night, I wanted to kill myself. And that was really where my alcoholism took me at the end. I did not know how to stay on the planet. And fortunately, somebody called and interrupted me. And so I stopped drinking because I went to bed, and I got up the next morning and really felt what I'd heard said in meetings many times, like the jig was up and I just couldn't do that. I didn't know you could go back to Alcoholics Anonymous. Like, as far as I was concerned, I'd failed. I didn't know, like, you could go back if you're drunk, and like, if you had, like, please come in, like, that's just part of what happens for people. And so there's another plan that was cooked up by my sister-in-law and her mother to get me back to meetings, which is another long story, but I ended up in Maine again. And as a result, at the end of July that year, I picked up my, what has been my last white chip. And that was, 29 and a half years ago. And it's amazing. Like, if you had told me all the things then about how life would be, I would have not believed you, because it couldn't have been like that. Like, I really believed it was life, sex, and then you die. Like, over the last 29 years, like, it has been the process of, like, slowly but surely coming to feel completely comfortable in my skin, which is not an experience I thought I was ever going to have. Like, I didn't love AA right at first, and everybody told me to be grateful, and that's a word that I hated, and so I was a little surly. At the time, I had the hair was about half an inch long, and I had combat boots, and I had the personality of your average feral cat. So I was either going to scratch your eyes out or just like run screaming out of the room. And slowly but surely, like learning how to like sit in my chair and like be nice to people. The one suggestion that Trisha had given me was like, she said, you know, you should go make coffee at meetings because you like coffee and it'll be a good way for you to join in. And so at my second meeting back, I went into the kitchen and, you know, it took me like a few tries to like offer to become the coffee maker. And they handed me the key to the hall. They're like, you can make it next week, which like totally freaked me out. But they had the business meeting. And then next week they showed up to show me how to make the coffee. I broke every single bowl in the place my first night because I was so scared. Like it felt like the bowls like slipped through my fingers and shattered on the floor. And they just laughed at me and told me to keep coming. And I never had that experience. Like I was welcomed in. And so I started taking the suggestions they'd given me and I went to, you know, a meeting every day. I went to the same meetings so that people got to know me. And I ended up having a really difficult first year. In December of my first year, my dad had a major stroke and it changed everything in the family. But like when that happened, I didn't have to think about what meetings to go to because I had a set meeting schedule and it was Monday night. So when I got to the end of my driveway, I took the left and went to the step meeting in Ipswich because that's what you do on Monday nights. And what I found over the years is like all the things that they told me really made sense. And eventually I got a sponsor and I started working the steps. My first foray through the steps was working them out of the Big Book, which was really awesome for me. I had really great guidance. And then later I had a sponsor that like did them out of the 12 and 12 and I got so much more out of that. And I've had so many different things over the years just give me more. I'd say that the best suggestion I ever got when I got sober was find a way to fall in love with AA. And like little by little, like I joined a home group and I fell in love with my home group members and then like things shifted. And I was fortunate early on to become a part of a Young People's Conference Committee. I was on MISCIPA, the Mass State Convention of Young People in AA. And I served on 8, 9, and 10 back in the early 90s. And I fell in love with the committees. And then I was on NECIPA, which is the New England Conference of Young People, which actually takes place this weekend. It'll start on Friday. My first one was number 3. They're on like 30, which totally freaks me out. Like, it's just amazing and so awesome to like still be here after all these years. But all the things that they told me early on are still the things that I try to do. And the biggest thing for me is service. As I mentioned earlier, like I'm the immediate past delegate. I was really lucky. I got involved not just in Young People's, but in general service. Did GSR at the beginning, all the things all the way down, and was able to attend the General Service Conference in 2017 and 2018. And that, to this day, is still one of the most unbelievable experiences in my life, to be trusted to carry the message. And that, you know, how Eastern Massachusetts feels was just such a huge, huge, just amazing blessing and privilege. And I'm so grateful for it. And right after I rotated out of delegate, I actually joined the host committee for ICIPA and was part of the Boston ICIPA host committee this last year in August and had a blast. And it brought me right back to like the very beginning. And honestly, it works best when I still do the same things. How I feel about things have changed. The way I'm like, my ability to sit in my own skin has definitely changed. And it's a lot more subtle on the way that character defects show up in my life now. But I still talk to my sponsor and I still go to meetings and I still try to be of service. And because of that, I have a really great life today. And, you know, it's a gift to show up. Like my first few Christmases were really, really hard. I was estranged from my family. And like, I'm able to be a better daughter and a better sister now. And I never thought that would happen. And I'm so grateful for my life and so grateful to be a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I appreciate having the chance to share that with you guys tonight. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.